Deep in the unforgiving jungle, where danger lurks in every shadow, stands a weathered cabin that most would call uninhabitable. For Thomas Everett and his 3 young children, it wasn't a choice, but their last resort. After corporate downsizing left him jobless and a series of misfortunes drained their savings, this forgotten structure became their only hope. The children, Emma, Sophie, and little Jack, watched with uncertainty as their father attempted to transform the rotting wood and rusted metal into something resembling a home. None of them could have imagined what lay hidden beneath decades of neglect and vegetation. What ancient secret was this family destined to uncover, and why had fate led them to this particular corner of the wilderness? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The crisp white envelope lay open on Thomas Everett's kitchen table. Its contents, a termination letter, stark against the worn wood surface. After 18 years of dedication to Westridge architectural design, his position had been eliminated due to corporate restructuring. The company's embossed logo mocked him from the letterhead. Thomas ran his weathered hands through salt and pepper hair, eyes fixed on the final severance amount. It wouldn't last 2 months. Not with the mortgage, not with the medical bills still lingering from Maria's 3-year battle with cancer. "Dad!" Emma stood in the doorway, her 17-year-old frame carrying a maturity beyond her years. Since Maria's passing, she'd become the de facto mother figure, practical to a fault. "Bad news." Thomas folded the letter, tucking it away, as if hiding it might undo its contents. "Nothing we can't handle, sweetheart." Emma's eyes, Maria's eyes, saw through him. "They let you go, didn't they?" In the living room, Sophie sat cross-legged on the carpet, 13 and lost in a world of watercolors. Her paintings had darkened since their mother died. Landscapes with stormy skies replacing the once bright meadows. 8-year-old Jack lay on his stomach beside her. Toy cars arranged in precise formations. His small fingers moved a red pickup truck, his father's vehicle in miniature, across the imaginary terrain. "We need to talk," Thomas announced, gathering his children. All of us. They assembled around the kitchen table, 3 pairs of eyes watching him with varying degrees of understanding. Thomas had rehearsed this moment, yet words failed him now. "I've been let go from Westridge," he finally managed. "They're downsizing the design department." Emma's jaw tightened. Sophie's lower lip trembled. Jack simply looked confused. "Are we poor now?" Jack asked. Thomas forced a smile. "We're going to be making some changes. I'll find another position soon." But the architecture industry was contracting across the board. 4 months of rejection letters had preceded today's termination notice. His age worked against him. Younger graduates commanded smaller salaries and brought digital expertise he'd never fully mastered. That evening, after the children were asleep, Thomas opened Maria's hope chest. The cedar scent still carried traces of her perfume. Beneath photo albums and handwritten letters lay a wooden box containing his grandfather's belongings, items Thomas had inherited but rarely examined. The following weeks passed in a blur of failed interviews and mounting bills. The mortgage payment was now 60 days overdue. Thomas sold his watch, then Maria's jewelry, pieces he'd promised to save for the girls. When the eviction notice appeared on their door, reality crashed down. 30 days to vacate the only home his children had known. That night, unable to sleep, Thomas returned to his grandfather's box. Among the items was a yellowed property deed to land in Sombra Verde, a remote jungle region where Thomas had spent several childhood summers. He remembered a modest cabin, overgrown but standing, on his last visit 25 years ago. "We own land," he whispered to Maria's photograph. "We have somewhere to go." Breakfast the next morning became a family council. Thomas spread a map across the table, circling their destination with a red marker. "It needs work," he admitted, "but it's ours, free and clear. We can live off the grid until I find steady work again." Emma's reaction was immediate. "The jungle?" "Dad, my college applications can be submitted online," Thomas finished. We'll find a way. Sophie's eyes widened. Are there jaguars? Not near the cabin, Thomas lied, having no idea what roamed the area now. Jack bounced in his seat. Like camping? Forever. Thomas nodded, relieved at least one child showed enthusiasm. That night, Emma cornered him while he sorted through belongings, deciding what little they could take. This is crazy, she said flatly. You're giving up. I'm adapting, Thomas countered. Sometimes life forces your hand. Mom wouldn't want this. The words stung like a physical blow. Your mother would want us to stay together. To survive. 2 weeks later, their suburban home stood empty, their lives condensed into Thomas's pickup truck and a small trailer. Sophie wept quietly as they pulled away, her final glimpse of the only neighborhood she'd known framed through a rain-splattered window. Beside her, Jack clutched his mother's photograph, his small thumb tracing her smile. Mom's coming with us, he assured Sophie. Dad says she's always watching. In the passenger seat, Emma maintained stony silence, her headphones creating a barrier between herself and her father's desperate decision. Thomas gripped the steering wheel, doubt and determination battling within him. The open road stretched before them, leading away from everything familiar and toward an uncertain wilderness that represented both their greatest risk and only hope. The hand-drawn map was faded and creased along its fold lines, annotations in Thomas's grandfather's cursive handwriting becoming indecipherable in places. Strange symbols decorated its corners, circular patterns that resembled neither conventional map legends nor any navigational marks Thomas recognized. He'd found it tucked inside the property deed envelope, a relic that now guided their journey into increasingly remote territory. Are you sure this is right? Emma asked as their truck navigated a barely visible dirt road. For days of travel had transformed paved highways into gravel paths, then into what could generously be called trails. Civilization had receded with each passing mile. My grandfather's directions haven't failed us yet, Thomas replied, more confidently than he felt. The truck lurched over exposed roots and stones, the trailer rattling precariously behind them. Sophie pressed her face against the window, watching wall-like vegetation close in on both sides. The jungle is eating the road, she whispered. Jack had fallen asleep, his small body swaying with the vehicle's movement. 3 days in roadside motels had exhausted their already limited funds, forcing them to sleep in the truck the previous night, when the path ahead disappeared entirely into a tangle of vines and fallen branches. Thomas stopped the vehicle. We walk from here, he announced, studying the map's final markings. Should be less than a mile. Emma looked at her inappropriate footwear with dismay. Seriously? They unloaded essential supplies, securing the truck and trailer as best they could. Thomas fashioned a makeshift pack for Jack, who had awakened with surprising enthusiasm for their adventure. The jungle closed around them immediately, humid, dense and alive with sounds none of them could identify. Thomas used his grandfather's machete to clear their path, following landmarks that corresponded vaguely to the map's indicators. After 40 minutes of laborious progress, the trees opened into a small clearing. There, listing slightly to one side and nearly swallowed by vegetation, stood the cabin. That's it? Emma's voice cracked. That's our new home? The structure was worse than Thomas remembered. The wooden porch had partially collapsed, vines invaded through broken windows, and the metal roof had rusted through in several places. What had seemed rustic but charming in childhood memory now appeared dangerously dilapidated. Sophie began to cry silently, fat tears rolling down her flushed cheeks. Jack approached the cabin without hesitation. Is there a bathroom? Not exactly, Thomas admitted, already calculating how to construct an outhouse. Inside, the cabin consisted of 2 rooms, a main living area with a stone fireplace and a smaller bedroom. Debris covered the floor, leaves, animal droppings, and the remains of what appeared to be a bird's nest. A table and chairs remained, though one chair had been reduced to kindling. We can't live here, Emma stated flatly. We can, Thomas countered, moving to open shutters that immediately came off their hinges. It needs work, but the foundation is solid. The frame too. The roof, however, was not. As if confirming Emma's assessment, dark clouds gathered and rain began to fall, first as scattered droplets tapping on metal, then as a torrential downpour that sent water streaming through dozens of holes in the ceiling. They huddled in the single dry corner of the main room that evening, eating cold beans from cans. No one spoke. Sophie occasionally sniffled. Jack pressed against Thomas's side, unusually subdued. Emma maintained deliberate distance from them all. When the children finally slept, curled together on the only salvageable mattress they'd found, Thomas stepped onto the broken porch. Rain continued falling, turning the clearing to mud that would make returning to their vehicle nearly impossible. "What have I done?" he whispered into the darkness. The jungle offered no answer beyond the incessant chorus of insects and the occasional call of a nightbird. Thomas remembered bringing Maria here once, early in their relationship. She'd found the isolation charming for a weekend adventure, marveling at stars unobscured by city lights. "Your grandfather chose this place for a reason," she'd said. Now, with no escape route, no income, and 3 children depending on him, Thomas couldn't imagine what that reason might have been. The property was worthless, too remote to sell, too dilapidated to be anything but a desperate last resort. He returned inside, checking on his sleeping children. Despite everything, they looked peaceful. Jack's arm flung across Sophie's shoulder, Emma curled protectively around them both. Their breathing synchronized in the stillness. "We'll make this work," Thomas promised them silently. Somehow, outside the rain intensified. Water dripping steadily onto the wooden floor through dozens of ceiling breaches, marking time like a room full of broken clocks. A leather-bound book lay open on Thomas's makeshift workbench, its pages filled with detailed botanical illustrations and handwritten notes. His grandfather's field journal documented dozens of local plants, their medicinal properties, growing patterns, and uses in construction. Thomas had discovered it while clearing debris from what was once a tool shed. The weathered volume had somehow survived decades of humidity and insects. Preserved in a metal box beneath rotted floorboards, morning light streamed through newly cleared windows, illuminating the cabin's main room. 1 week of backbreaking work had yielded modest improvements. Thomas had patched the most egregious roof leaks using salvaged metal sheets found behind the cabin. The floor was now clear of debris, though warped boards still creaked ominously in places. Emma swept persistently, fighting the jungle's constant invasion. "No matter how much I clean, there's always more dirt," she muttered. "That's because we're living in it," Thomas replied, studying his grandfather's notes on a type of vine that might serve as temporary roof patching. "We need to work with the environment, not against it." Sophie had arranged their limited possessions with careful attention. Their few books stood on a reclaimed shelf. Clothing hung from pegs Thomas had fashioned from sturdy branches. In one corner, she'd created what she called her remembering space, a small shrine containing Maria's photograph and treasured family mementos. "Dad, look what I found!" Jack burst through the doorway, his small hands cupping something gently. Green streaks marked his clothes and face. "Jack, your shoes!" Emma scolded. They had established a rule about removing muddy footwear that Jack consistently ignored. Unperturbed, Jack opened his hands to reveal a brilliantly colored frog no larger than a quarter. "Can I keep him, please?" Thomas knelt to examine the creature. "Better not, buddy. That's a poison dart frog. Beautiful but dangerous. Like Mom always said about the ocean," Sophie commented quietly. "Beautiful things can still hurt you." Thomas guided Jack outside to release the frog. The clearing around the cabin had transformed somewhat under their efforts. A rudimentary clothesline stretched between trees. A fire pit served for cooking and boiling water from the nearby stream. Thomas had begun constructing a rain catchment system using tarpaulins and plastic containers from their supplies. "When can I explore more?" Jack asked, watching the frog disappear into dense foliage. "Not until we've secured the perimeter," Thomas answered, gesturing to his partial progress on a fence of sharpened stakes. "The jungle isn't a playground. Later, as afternoon heat intensified, the family gathered around their makeshift table for a lunch of rice and canned vegetables. Their supplies were dwindling faster than Thomas had anticipated. "I found these growing near the stream," Thomas said, placing several strange-looking tubers on the table. "According to Grandpa's journal, they're edible when cooked." Emma eyed them suspiciously. "You're sure?" "The illustrations are quite detailed," Thomas assured her, though his confidence wavered. "We'll try them tonight." "I miss pizza," Jack sighed. "I miss everything," Sophie added. Thomas changed the subject. "I've been thinking about our next steps. The stream provides water, but we need sustainable food. Grandfather's journal mentions good fishing spots nearby. We need electricity," Emma countered. "And internet. My application deadlines? The nearest town is 2 days' journey," Thomas reminded her. "We'll make monthly trips for essentials and use their internet cafe." Emma's face hardened. "So I'm supposed to put my entire future on hold while we play Swiss Family Robinson?" "We're adapting to circumstances, Emma, not playing." "This wasn't my choice," she snapped, pushing away from the table. That evening, Thomas found her sitting alone on a fallen log at the clearing's edge. "I know this isn't what you planned," he said, joining her. "It isn't what any of us planned. Mom would have found another way." Thomas considered this. "Maybe, but she also believed in facing challenges head-on." Emma remained silent, watching fireflies emerge in the gathering dusk. "Your mother and I always taught you that home isn't a place," Thomas continued. "It's wherever we're together. This place isn't just different, Dad. It's dangerous." As if confirming her assessment, something large moved in the underbrush nearby. Thomas instinctively positioned himself between Emma and the sound. "That's what I mean," she whispered. "Later, after the children were asleep in the bedroom they now shared." Thomas returned to his grandfather's journal. By lantern light, he studied entries about seasonal weather patterns, noting with concern that the rainy season would intensify in the coming weeks. They needed better shelter, sustainable food sources, and greater security. Outside, the jungle pulsed with nocturnal life. Thomas listened to its rhythms, trying to distinguish between normal sounds and potential threats. Somewhere a jaguar screamed, a sound eerily similar to a woman in distress. The children stirred but didn't wake. Thomas turned another page in the journal, finding a hand-drawn map of nearby caves. "Emergency shelter," his grandfather had noted. Thomas marked the location on his own crude map of the area. They would explore it tomorrow. The jade figurine fit perfectly in Jack's palm. A jaguar carved with remarkable detail, its eyes inlaid with tiny amber stones that caught the light with an almost sentient gleam. He had discovered it while playing beneath the cabin during a particularly heavy downpour, when the eroded soil had revealed a small hollow space in the foundation stones. 2 weeks had transformed their relationship with the jungle. Thomas had established a daily routine of repairs in the cool morning hours, followed by foraging and hunting attempts in the afternoon. The roof no longer leaked except in one stubborn corner. A vegetable garden had been started using seeds from his grandfather's collection, though nothing had sprouted yet. "What did you find there, buddy?" Thomas asked, noticing Jack hunched over something at the edge of the clearing. Jack startled, quickly closing his fingers around the figurine. "Nothing." Thomas recognized the instinct, the need for something that was entirely one's own in their communal existence. "Looks like something to me," he said gently. After a moment's hesitation, Jack opened his hand, revealing the jade jaguar. "Where did you get this?" Thomas asked, carefully keeping his tone neutral despite his surprise. "Under the house." "There's a secret place." Thomas crouched beside his son. May I see it?" Jack reluctantly surrendered the figurine. It was heavier than Thomas expected, the stone cool and smooth against his skin. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, certainly not something his grandfather could have made. The jaguar's pose suggested it was mid-leap, muscles tensed beneath its carved fur. "It's beautiful," Thomas acknowledged, returning it to Jack's waiting palm. "Can you show me where you found it?" Jack led him to a spot where erosion had created a small channel beneath the cabin's stone foundation. Thomas lay on his stomach, peering into the darkness with his flashlight. The beam revealed a small natural cavity in the earth, lined with what appeared to be clay bricks of ancient design. "I see," Thomas murmured, though he didn't entirely. "Jack, did you find anything else down there?" Jack shook his head. "Just Jaguar. He was watching me." That evening, after the children were asleep, Thomas examined the area more thoroughly. The cavity extended farther than he had initially thought. Not a natural formation, but a deliberately constructed chamber. Its entrance had been sealed with materials matching the foundation, hiding it from casual observation. Inside, Thomas found nothing but packed earth and the impression where the figurine had rested. Someone had emptied this chamber long ago, leaving only the Jaguar behind. The following morning, Emma discovered Jack talking to the figurine in the garden. "It's not a toy," she scolded. Reaching for it, Jack clutched it to his chest. "He's helping the plants grow. Don't be a baby. Dad needs help with the water filters," Sophie intervened, placing herself between her siblings. "Let him be, Emma. It's not hurting anything," Emma sighed with exaggerated patience. "We don't have time for make-believe. Those storm clouds mean we need to secure everything before the rain comes." The sky had indeed darkened ominously throughout the morning. Thomas worked quickly to reinforce their newly constructed rain shelters, while Emma gathered firewood and stored it in the driest corner of the cabin. When the storm hit, it brought wind fierce enough to bend treetops. The family huddled inside as rain lashed against windows and thunder cracked directly overhead. Despite their roof repairs, water soon began seeping through in places, forming puddles on the wooden floor. "I'm scared," Sophie whispered, as lightning illuminated the room with stark white flashes. "It's just a storm," Emma said, but her voice betrayed her own unease. Jack sat cross-legged on his sleeping mat, the jade figurine before him. "Jaguar isn't scared," he announced. "Jaguar says this is his song." Thomas watched his youngest with growing concern. Jack had always had an active imagination, but his attachment to the figurine had developed with unusual intensity. The storm continued well into the night. As the others finally slept, Thomas noticed Jack slip from his bed and move to the window, holding the figurine up to the glass. "What are you doing?" Thomas whispered. "Showing him the lightning," Jack replied simply. "He's been under the ground too long." "How do you know that?" Jack turned, his expression eerily mature in the storm's flickering light. "He told me." A particularly violent thunderclap punctuated this statement, rattling the windows. Outside, through the rain-streaked glass, Thomas thought he glimpsed movement at the clearing's edge, something large and sinuous disappearing into the underbrush. "Time for sleep," he said, guiding Jack back to bed. But sleep proved elusive for Thomas. He sat by the window until dawn, watching the storm gradually subside and listening to the strange rhythms of the jungle night, wondering what else might be hidden beneath their feet. Waiting to be discovered, the clay tablet fragment lay on Thomas's workbench, its surface etched with symbols unlike any writing system he recognized. Sophie had found it half buried near the stream while gathering water that morning, its exposed edge catching her eye after the storm had washed away layers of soil. The fragment was roughly triangular, broken at one edge, suggesting it was once part of a larger piece. The symbols appeared to be arranged in concentric circles, with lines radiating outward from a central point. "It looks like a map," Sophie suggested. Watching her father examine her discovery, Thomas nodded, angling the fragment toward the morning light streaming through the window. "Maybe, or some kind of calendar." 3 days had passed since the violent storm. The jungle had responded with explosive growth, vines and saplings seemingly doubled in size overnight. Their garden had sprouted suddenly, tiny green shoots pushing through dark soil with surprising vigor. Jack approached, the jade jaguar clutched possessively in his hand. "Can I see?" Thomas tilted the tablet for his son's inspection. Jack's eyes widened, and he held up the figurine beside it. "Look," he said, pointing to a small symbol near the tablet's center. "Same as Jaguar's belly." Thomas looked closer. Sure enough, a marking on the tablet matched a subtle etching on the underside of the jade figurine that he hadn't noticed before, a spiral surrounded by what appeared to be stylized flames. "Where exactly did you find this?" Thomas asked Sophie. She led him to the stream, now running higher and faster after the rainfall. The water had carved a new channel, exposing what appeared to be a stone-lined conduit beneath layers of accumulated soil and vegetation. There, Sophie pointed to a spot where the water disappeared beneath a jumble of rocks and roots. Thomas knelt, clearing debris, until he could see that the stream had been deliberately channeled at some point in the distant past. The stonework was sophisticated but weathered by centuries of flowing water. "Dad!" Jack called from several yards downstream. "I found stairs." Thomas hurried to his son's location. Jack stood beside what was indeed a series of stone steps descending into the ground, previously concealed by thick undergrowth, but now partially exposed by the storm's fury. Moss-covered and crumbling at the edges, they disappeared into darkness after about 10 steps. "Stay here," Thomas instructed, retrieving a flashlight from his pocket. He descended cautiously, testing each step before committing his weight. The air grew cooler as he went deeper, carrying an earthy scent tinged with something unfamiliar. The stairway ended at a small landing facing what once might have been a doorway, now blocked by a rockfall. Thomas examined the surrounding stonework, finding more symbols matching those on the tablet fragment. He snapped several photos with his phone before returning to the surface. "What's down there?" Sophie asked, eyes wide with curiosity. "Just an old structure," Thomas answered, deliberately understating his discovery. "Probably from an early settlement. People lived underground." Jack asked. "Not exactly." A voice from behind startled them. "They built sacred spaces beneath the earth, where the living could commune with the spirits of the jungle." Thomas turned to find an elderly man watching them from the tree line. Weathered skin, deeply creased around observant eyes, suggested decades spent beneath the tropical sun. He carried a worn machete and a canvas pack, his clothing practical for jungle traversal. "Who are you?" Thomas demanded, positioning himself between the stranger and his children. "Manuel Ortega," the man replied, making no move to approach closer. "I was friend to your grandfather. I've been watching your cabin since you arrived, watching us. Why?" Manuel's gaze shifted to Jack, specifically to the jade figurine clutched in the boy's hand. "Because I knew eventually you would find things. Things that have been waiting." "Dad!" Emma called, running toward them from the direction of the cabin. She stopped short upon seeing Manuel. "Who's that?" "He says he knew Grandpa," Jack answered before Thomas could respond. Manuel nodded slowly. "Your grandfather and I were both guardians of this place. When he left, I remained." His eyes returned to the clay tablet fragment Thomas now held. "You found a piece of the Wayfinder." "The what?" "A map to that which is hidden." Manuel gestured toward the partially excavated stairway. "There is much you should know, but not here. The jungle has ears." Thomas assessed the stranger, searching for signs of deception or threat. He found only a direct gaze and what appeared to be genuine concern. "Come to the cabin," Thomas finally offered. "We'll talk there." As they walked back, Jack moved to Manuel's side. "My jaguar has the same marks," he said, holding up the figurine. Manuel smiled gently. "Of course he does, child. He has been waiting for someone to find him again." He looked at Thomas. "All of this has been waiting for the right family to return." "What do you mean?" Thomas asked. "Your grandfather didn't choose this land by accident," Manuel replied. "And neither did it choose you." The pocket watch refused to tick, despite Thomas's careful winding. Gold-plated and intricately engraved, with intertwining vines and leaves. It bore no manufacturer's mark, only a set of initials on the inside cover. A.E. His grandfather, Albert Everett. Manuel had presented it to Thomas that morning, removing it from a small leather pouch he wore around his neck. "He asked me to give this to you if you ever returned," Manuel explained, watching Thomas examine the timepiece. "Said you would need it when the right moment came?" "Need a broken watch?" Thomas asked. Manuel smiled enigmatically. "It doesn't tell ordinary time." 3 days had passed since Manuel's appearance. The elderly man had taken up residence in a small shelter he constructed at the edge of the clearing, declining Thomas's offer to stay in the cabin. Better I remain as gatekeeper, he had said, whatever that meant. Inside the cabin, Manuel sat with the family around their makeshift table. He had brought fresh fruits and vegetables from his own garden, along with dried fish and herbs that transformed their simple meal into something almost savory. Your grandfather was an unusual man, Manuel continued. He came here first as a young botanist, studying jungle plants. But he found something more valuable than new species. What? Sophie leaned forward eagerly. Knowledge. This region once hosted a civilization unlike any other, people who understood the language of nature itself. They called themselves the Verdantes, not conquerors but custodians. Emma rolled her eyes. This sounds like a fairy tale. Most truths do when first encountered, Manuel replied without offense. The Verdantes built their sacred sites underground to remain in harmony with the jungle above. Your cabin stands at what was once an entrance to their central temple complex. Jack nodded, as if this confirmed something he already knew. That's why Jaguar was under the house. Yes, child. Guardians were often marked by animal spirits. The jaguar represents protective strength. Thomas pocketed the watch. My grandfather never mentioned any of this in his journals. The written journals were only for practical knowledge. The true history he kept protected. Manuel tapped his temple. In memory, passed through stories, and in certain objects hidden for safekeeping, like the tablet Sophie found, Thomas suggested, a fragment only. There are others. That evening, while the children slept, Thomas showed Manuel the chamber beneath the cabin foundation where Jack had found the jade figurine. This was a sacred vault, Manuel confirmed, his flashlight revealing details Thomas had missed, faint pigments suggesting the walls had once been painted with elaborate scenes. One of many. What exactly was my grandfather guarding? Thomas asked. The legacy of the Verdantes, their understanding of plants that heal, technologies that work with nature rather than against it, knowledge that powerful interests would exploit. What interests? The same forces that always seek control. Corporations, governments. Your grandfather refused to let that happen. Thomas considered this. And now that responsibility falls to me. Only if you choose to accept it. Manuel's gaze was piercing in the flashlight's glow. The guardianship is offered, never imposed. The following morning, Thomas rose before dawn, unable to sleep, troubled by dreams of underground passages and whispering voices. He found himself drawn to his grandfather's journal. Paging through it with fresh understanding, he noticed subtle marks in the margins that might correlate with Manuel's stories. He was so absorbed that he didn't notice Sophie until she spoke. Dad, I saw people in the jungle last night. Thomas turned, alarmed. What people? Where? By the big ceiba tree. They were wearing green clothes with paint on their faces. I thought I was dreaming, but Jack saw them too. Thomas found Jack outside, sitting cross-legged in the dirt, the jade jaguar positioned before him as if they were in conversation. Jack, did you see people in the jungle last night? Jack nodded without looking up. The forest people. They're checking if we belong here. Did they speak to you? Not with words. Thomas's concern deepened. Jack had been spending increasingly long periods in apparent communion with the figurine, sometimes murmuring in what sounded like another language. Later, Thomas approached Manuel, who was calmly repairing fishing nets outside his shelter. There may be other people nearby. Sophie and Jack both saw someone. Manuel appeared unsurprised. The Verdants never completely vanished. Some descendants maintain the old ways, living deep in the protected jungle. Are they dangerous? Not to those who respect the land. Manuel set aside his work. But they are cautious of outsiders. Your family's acceptance will depend on your intentions. My only intention is to keep my children safe. Then you must understand what you're protecting them from and what you're protecting. Manuel gestured toward the pocket watch, visible in Thomas's shirt pocket. It's time to learn more. Thomas hesitated. What about Emma? She doesn't believe any of this. The skeptical ones often become the strongest believers once they've seen proof, Manuel replied. Tomorrow we will visit the temple entrance properly. All of you, the children too. Is it safe? Safer than ignorance in what's coming. "What's coming?" Thomas pressed. Manuel's weathered face grew solemn. "Change, always change. The question is whether it will honor what came. Before or destroy it." The stone key rested heavily in Thomas's palm, a cylindrical object carved from dark green jade with intricate patterns matching those on the tablet fragment. 8 inches long and tapered at one end, it resembled an oversized chess piece more than a conventional key. Manuel had retrieved it from a hollow tree near the stone stairs, its hiding place known only to guardians. "This opens the first seal," Manuel explained as they gathered at the entrance to the underground stairway. "There are others deeper inside." The morning sun filtered through the jungle canopy, creating dappled patterns on the moss-covered steps. Birds called in complex sequences above them, while insects maintained a constant background chorus. The air hung heavy with moisture from the previous night's rain. Emma stood slightly apart from the others, arms crossed defensively. "I still think this is crazy. We should be figuring out how to get back to civilization, not exploring caves." "It's not a cave," Jack corrected with the certainty of someone much older. "It's a temple." Thomas studied his youngest son with growing concern. Jack had awakened before dawn, already dressed and waiting by the door, with the jade jaguar tucked safely in his pocket. "They're expecting us," he had announced when Thomas found him. "Who's expecting us?" Thomas had asked. "The sleeping ones." Now, as they prepared to descend, Thomas placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "Stay close to me, buddy." Sophie clutched her sketchbook. She had been drawing increasingly detailed renditions of symbols from the tablet and similar markings she claimed to have seen in her dreams. "Will there be paintings inside?" "Like the ones in my head." "Perhaps," Manuel replied. "The Verdante were great artists." Thomas turned to Emma. "You can wait here if you want. Keep watch." For a moment it seemed she might agree. Then something shifted in her expression, curiosity temporarily overcoming skepticism. "No, someone needs to make sure you all don't get carried away with this, whatever it is." Manuel led the way, descending carefully with a torch he had crafted from local materials. Thomas followed with Jack, then Sophie, with Emma bringing up the rear. The stairway extended deeper than Thomas's initial exploration had revealed, curving gradually to the left as it descended. "The blockage has been cleared," Manuel noted, as they reached the landing where Thomas had previously encountered fallen rocks. "The jungle is opening the way, or someone cleared it," Emma muttered. The passage beyond opened into a small antechamber with walls covered in faded murals depicting jungle scenes interspersed with geometric patterns. Sophie gasped, immediately opening her sketchbook. "These are like my drawings." Manuel nodded approvingly. "The knowledge finds ways to surface." At the center of the chamber stood a stone pedestal with a cylindrical opening that matched the dimensions of the jade key. Manuel gestured for Thomas to approach. "The guardian must open the way." Thomas hesitated. "I haven't agreed to be a guardian, yet here you stand with your children seeking understanding." Actions speak louder than words. With a deep breath, Thomas inserted the stone key into the pedestal. It fit perfectly. For a moment nothing happened. Then a low rumbling sound emanated from deep within the stone, and a section of the wall slid sideways, revealing a passage beyond. "How is that possible?" Emma whispered, her skepticism faltering. "There's no electricity, no hydraulics. The Verdantes understood forces we have forgotten," Manuel replied. "Energy flows that modern science is only beginning to rediscover." The newly revealed corridor stretched before them, illuminated by an unexpected source, phosphorescent fungi growing in deliberate patterns along the ceiling, casting a soft blue-green light that seemed to intensify as they watched. "It's responding to our presence," Thomas realized. Jack stepped forward confidently. "They're welcoming us home." The passage led to a larger chamber, dominated by a circular pool of water, so still it resembled polished obsidian. Stone benches surrounded the pool, and more elaborate murals covered the walls, these depicting people engaged in what appeared to be rituals involving plants and animals. "The reflection chamber," Manuel explained, "where seekers would contemplate the knowledge they sought before proceeding deeper." Sophie approached the pool's edge, peering into its dark surface. "I can't see my reflection." "That's not what it reflects," Manuel said. As if responding to his words, the surface of the water began to ripple, though nothing had touched it. Images formed and dissolved. The jungle seen from above, animals moving through underbrush, plants growing in accelerated time. "What are we seeing?" Thomas asked. "The memory of this place," Manuel answered. "And perhaps its future." Emma had fallen silent, her expression a mixture of disbelief and reluctant wonder, as she watched the impossible images forming in the water. Jack knelt by the pool, placing the jade jaguar beside him. "It's talking to us. What is it saying?" Thomas asked, crouching beside his son. Jack tilted his head as if listening to something only he could hear. "That we have to decide. Decide what? Whether to wake them up." The bronze amulet hung from a braided cord of plant fibers that had somehow withstood centuries without deterioration. Circular and approximately 3 inches in diameter, its face depicted a tree whose roots and branches formed a complete circle, intertwining at the top. Embedded at the center was a small green stone that seemed to pulse with an inner light when held near the underground pool. "The emblem of harmony," Manuel explained as Thomas examined it. "Worn by those who achieved balance between knowledge and wisdom." They had returned to the reflection chamber for the 3rd consecutive day. After their initial discovery, Manuel had insisted they proceed gradually, allowing the temple to become accustomed to their presence. The amulet had appeared this morning, resting on one of the stone benches where nothing had been the previous day. "It simply materialized?" Emma asked, her skepticism reasserting itself despite the inexplicable things she'd already witnessed. "No," Manuel replied patiently. "It was placed here by those watching our progress." "The jungle people," Sophie whispered, excited. "I saw one yesterday, a girl about my age. She was watching me from the trees when I was gathering kindling." Thomas looked sharply at his daughter. "Why didn't you tell me?" "She put her finger to her lips," Sophie demonstrated. "Like it was a secret between us." Jack sat cross-legged by the pool's edge, the jade jaguar positioned before him as had become his custom. The figurine seemed to serve as a focus for whatever communion the boy had established with this place. "They're deciding if we're ready," he said without turning. "Ready for what?" Thomas asked. "The next room." Manuel nodded as if this made perfect sense. "There is a natural progression. The amulet is both gift and key." Thomas slipped the cord over his head, feeling the weight of the amulet against his chest. A curious warmth spread from it, not unpleasant but definitely noticeable. "What does it open?" "Understanding first," Manuel said. "The physical door will follow." Emma had been examining the chamber's murals, attempting to decipher their meaning through logical analysis rather than intuition. "These symbols keep repeating," she observed, pointing to a particular arrangement of lines and curves. "Here and over there. They must be significant. They're like musical notes," Sophie said, sketching rapidly in her book. "They show how things flow," Manuel smiled approvingly. "Precisely." The Verdantes understood that energy, what they called the vital force, moves through everything in patterns. These symbols are their notation system. Thomas approached the wall where Emma stood. "Can you translate them?" "Not directly into words," Manuel admitted. "They express concepts our language compresses too simplistically. But the amulet helps the wearer sense their meaning." As if responding to this statement, the embedded stone in the amulet glowed more intensely. Thomas felt a strange resonance, almost like hearing music without sound. The mural patterns suddenly seemed to shimmer with significance. "They're about growth cycles," he said, surprised by his own certainty. "How everything returns to nurture what comes after." Jack turned from the pool, his expression serious. "The water wants to show us something important." The surface of the pool had indeed begun to ripple again. But the images forming were different from previous sessions. Not scenes of natural beauty, but what appeared to be destruction. Forests burning, waters rising to swallow coastlines, storms of terrifying intensity. "What is this?" Thomas demanded. "What is coming?" Manuel answered grimly. "What has already begun." The images shifted again, showing the temple complex from above, a vast network of underground chambers and passages extending far beyond what they had explored. At the center glowed a brilliant green light. "The heart," Manuel whispered. "It still lives," Jack nodded solemnly. "It's waiting for us." The water calmed suddenly, returning to its mirror-like stillness. In the silence that followed, they became aware of a new sound, a rhythmic tapping coming from the passage they had not yet explored. "Someone's there," Emma said, moving closer to her father. "Not someone," Manuel corrected. "Something." "The way is opening." A section of the far wall began to slide smoothly aside, revealing a passage that descended deeper into the earth. Unlike the previous corridor, this one was completely dark, the luminescent fungi absent. "Do we go in?" Thomas asked, instinctively shielding his children. "That depends," Manuel replied, "on whether you accept what the amulet signifies." "Which is what exactly?" "Responsibility. Not just for your family's survival, but for what this place contains. Knowledge that could heal or harm, depending on who wields it." The elderly man's eyes were solemn. "Your grandfather understood this choice. Now you face it too." Thomas looked at his children, Emma's cautious intelligence, Sophie's intuitive creativity, Jack's mysterious connection to this place. They had come here seeking mere shelter, but had found something far more significant. What would happen if we just left? Went back to the city somehow? "Others would find this place eventually," Manuel said. "Those without respect for its purpose. The Verdante's knowledge would become property, patented, controlled, used for profit rather than healing. And if we stay, you become part of a much older story, guardians of something precious." Thomas fingered the amulet, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic. "I need time to think." "Of course," Manuel agreed, "but not too much time. The jungle has already begun to whisper about your presence here. Soon, others will listen." The crystalline seed gleamed with inner luminescence, no larger than a marble, yet somehow containing what appeared to be a complete miniature ecosystem. Within its transparent structure, tiny formations resembled trees, waterways, and mountains in perfect proportion. When held to the light, the patterns shifted subtly, as if alive. Jack had discovered it nestled in the soil near their garden, after a particularly vivid dream directed him to dig in that exact spot. "It's a Verdante knowledge seed," Manuel explained, carefully examining it without touching. "They stored information in crystalline structures, encoded in patterns that respond to specific frequencies." A week had passed since their discovery of the new passage. Thomas had requested time to consider their path forward, focusing on practical improvements to their living situation while wrestling with the implications of Manuel's revelations. The garden now flourished improbably, yielding vegetables that by normal growth patterns should have taken months to mature. "Is it dangerous?" Thomas asked, watching Jack cradle the seed in his palm with unusual gentleness. "Not inherently, but powerful, yes." Manuel gestured toward their thriving garden. "It contains botanical knowledge, growing methods that work with natural energy rather than forcing it." Emma had been monitoring the garden's progress with scientific precision, measuring growth rates and comparing them with standard agricultural timelines. "It's impossible," she had declared that morning. "Plants don't grow this fast," yet they did, and not just faster but healthier. The vegetables harvested from their garden possessed a vibrancy of color and flavor unlike anything they'd experienced before. "Look," Jack said now, placing the seed at the center of a small patch he had cleared. Within minutes, tiny shoots emerged from the soil around it, unfurling into miniature plants of a species Thomas didn't recognize. Sophie knelt beside her brother, sketching rapidly. "They're dancing," she whispered. Indeed, the seedlings seemed to sway in patterns unrelated to any breeze, their movements synchronized as if responding to music only they could hear. "The Verdantes understood plant intelligence," Manuel said. "They communicated with growing things, established relationships of mutual benefit." "That's not possible," Emma insisted, though with less conviction than before. "Many things seem impossible until experienced directly," Manuel replied. Your instruments measure what they're designed to detect, nothing more. Thomas touched the bronze amulet that now remained permanently around his neck. It had become warmer over the past days, its embedded stone glowing faintly at unexpected moments. The plants respond to Jack specifically. Why? Manuel watched the boy with thoughtful eyes. Some souls resonate more easily with certain knowledge. Jack has an affinity for living systems, what the Verdantes called green listening. That evening, as they prepared dinner from their garden's bounty, an unexpected sound broke the jungle's familiar symphony, the distant mechanical growl of vehicles. Thomas tensed immediately. Someone's coming. Manuel nodded grimly. I feared this might happen. The jungle network has been disturbed lately. New paths being cut, survey markers appearing. Who would come all the way out here? Those who seek what is buried. Resource extractors always find their way eventually. Thomas gathered the children inside, instructing them to remain quiet. With Manuel, he moved to the edge of their clearing, listening as the engine sounds grew louder, then stopped perhaps a kilometer away. Government research team, Manuel murmured after a moment. They come periodically, collecting samples, taking measurements. They claim environmental monitoring, but they seek pharmaceutical opportunities. Do they know about the temple? Not its true nature, but they've detected energy anomalies, botanical irregularities. They suspect something valuable exists here. Will they find us? Eventually. This area is supposedly unoccupied, protected land. Your presence will raise questions. Thomas considered their options. We could hide deeper in the jungle until they leave. They will return. And others after them. Manuel's expression was grave. The choice I spoke of, it approaches faster than I anticipated. Later that night, Thomas found Jack sitting alone outside, the crystalline seed glowing softly in his outstretched hand. You should be sleeping. Buddy, the seed was talking to me, Jack replied. Showing me things. What things? How everything connects. How the jungle thinks. Jack looked up, his expression unnervingly adult. The people coming want to take pieces away, but everything needs to stay together to work properly. Thomas sat beside his son. Manuel thinks we need to make a decision soon. Jack nodded solemnly. The sleeping ones are getting restless. They know strangers are near. He closed his fingers gently around the seed. Dad, I think Mom sent us here. What makes you say that? I dream about her sometimes. She's standing in the temple, smiling. She says this is where we needed to be all along. Thomas felt his throat tighten. Jack, she says you'll understand soon. Jack placed the seed in his father's palm. Hold it and think about Mom. Thomas hesitated, then closed his fingers around the crystal. Warmth spread up his arm, and with it came an overwhelming sense of Maria's presence, not as memory, but as something immediate and real. Her voice seemed to whisper directly into his mind, trust what you found here. It's more important than you know. When he opened his eyes, Jack was watching him with quiet certainty. See, she's helping us choose. The ceremonial mask seemed to change expression depending on the angle from which it was viewed. Crafted from polished wood darkened by centuries, it featured a human face with features that somehow incorporated aspects of jaguar, bird, and serpent without appearing monstrous. Inlaid shell formed the eyes, catching light with unsettling awareness. Thomas had discovered it concealed within a hollow space in the cabin's main support beam, while reinforcing the structure against the approaching rainy season. The face of transformation. Manuel identified it, his voice hushed with reverence, worn by Verdante's guides during rites of passage. Your grandfather must have hidden it here for safekeeping. They stood in the cabin's main room, morning light slanting through windows Emma had recently fitted with woven screens to keep insects at bay. Outside, the sounds of the government research team's camp could occasionally be heard. Machinery, voices carrying on the wind, the distant thrum of generators. For 3 days, they had maintained their distance, but their presence loomed like an approaching storm. Thomas turned the mask in his hands, noting how the wooden surface seemed almost warm to the touch. Why would my grandfather hide this in the cabin specifically? Perhaps he anticipated your return someday. Manuel gestured toward Jack, who was watching the mask with unusual intensity. "Or your sons." Emma entered from outside, where she had been monitoring the research team's movements using binoculars salvaged from their supplies. "They're moving closer, setting up equipment on the ridge to the east." "What kind of equipment?" Thomas asked. "Looks like sensing technology. Ground-penetrating radar, maybe." Emma had been researching geological survey methods using her father's old textbooks. "They're searching for something specific, the temple," Manuel confirmed. "They've detected its energy signature but haven't located the entrance." Sophie looked up from her sketchbook, where she had been drawing increasingly detailed maps of passages they had yet to explore, based on what she described as dreams that don't feel like dreams. "Will they find us?" "Soon," Manuel replied honestly. "This area is supposedly uninhabited, protected land. Your presence raises questions they'll want answered." Thomas placed the mask on the table. "We need a plan, a story that explains why we're here without revealing what we've found. A story based partly in truth," Manuel suggested. "You inherited the land from your grandfather. You lost your job and brought your family here to start over." "All true. And if they ask about the temple, you know nothing of it. You've been focused on survival, on making a home here." Jack approached the table, reaching for the mask with a certainty that brooked no interference. "May I?" Thomas hesitated, then nodded. Jack lifted the mask, studying it with an expression far older than his years. "It wants to be worn," he said simply. "Jack," Thomas began, concerned. Before he could finish, Jack raised the mask to his face. The moment it made contact, a visible shudder passed through the boy's small frame. The mask, clearly adult-sized, should have appeared comical on Jack's face. Instead, it seemed to conform perfectly, as if reshaping itself. "Jack!" Emma moved toward her brother, alarmed. Manuel raised a hand to stop her. "Wait, watch!" Jack stood utterly still, his breathing slowed to near imperceptibility. Then, in a voice that retained his childish timbre but carried unfamiliar cadences, he spoke. "They're closer than you think." 3 researchers separated from the main group this morning, following energy readings. "They'll reach the stream by midday." Thomas exchanged a shocked glance with Manuel. "How could he know that?" "The mask connects the wearer to wider awareness," Manuel explained. "It's channeling information from the jungle itself, animals, plants, perhaps even the hidden watchers." Jack lowered the mask slowly, his eyes momentarily unfocused. "Wow," he whispered. "That was big. What did you feel?" Thomas asked, kneeling beside his son. "Everything at once. Like I could see through every leaf and hear through every animal." Jack blinked, returning fully to himself. "Dad, they have maps of Grandpa's research sites. They're looking for his specimens." This confirmed Manuel's suspicions. Albert collected botanical samples with unusual properties. He documented only the mundane ones officially. The truly remarkable discoveries he protected. Thomas made a decision. "We need to secure the temple entrance. Cover our tracks to and from it." "Already begun," Manuel replied. "Merci. But there's something else you should know." He gestured toward the mask Jack still held. "That is not merely ceremonial. It's a key to areas deeper in the temple, places even I haven't accessed." "How do you know?" "Your grandfather spoke of it. The mask opens the way to the Verdante's most protected knowledge, what they called the living archive." Thomas took the mask gently from Jack, feeling its inexplicable weight. "Then we definitely need to keep it hidden." Jack looked up at his father, eyes serious. "They won't find it if they can't see it." "What do you mean?" "The mask can hide itself, and other important things." Jack touched the wooden surface with one small finger. "It showed me how." Thomas studied his youngest child, increasingly aware that Jack's connection to this place and its artifacts transcended conventional understanding. "Show me." The living orchid defied botanical classification. Its petals, iridescent blue with veins of amber, responded to touch by changing color and pattern. Its roots weren't anchored in soil, but extended freely, moving with deliberate purpose when no one watched directly. Sophie had discovered it growing in a previously empty pot outside her window, materializing overnight as if planted by unseen hands. A verdante sentinel, Manuel explained, observing how the flower turned toward voices. They cultivated plants with enhanced awareness to serve as guardians and messengers. 5 days had passed since the research team's advance scouts had been spotted near the stream. The family had implemented Jack's surprising strategy, a combination of physical camouflage and what Manuel called perception shifting. Somehow, the ceremonial mask had imparted knowledge that allowed Jack to adjust the family's living space to become nearly invisible to outside observation. The cabin remained physically present, but seemed to blend seamlessly into the surrounding jungle when viewed from a distance. "They walked right past us yesterday," Emma reported, returning from her observation post. Her initial skepticism had evolved into pragmatic acceptance of the inexplicable. 3 researchers with equipment. They looked directly at the cabin and kept going, like they couldn't see it. Thomas examined the orchid, which extended a tendril toward his hand without making contact. "And this? What purpose does it serve?" "Early warning," Manuel replied. "It senses intentions. Notice how it retracts slightly from aggressive movements, but extends toward gentle ones." Sophie had been sketching the flower in precise detail, capturing its shifting patterns. "It told me something last night," she said matter-of-factly. "Not in words, but in feelings. It's worried about Jack." Thomas glanced toward the bedroom, where Jack was currently sleeping. The boy had been exhausted since implementing the perception shifting, as if the process had drained his energy. "What about Jack? He's changing too fast." Sophie continued drawing, not looking up. "Taking in too much too quickly," Manuel nodded gravely. "I've seen this before. When someone, especially someone young, forms a strong connection with Verdante's knowledge, there can be acceleration." "Acceleration of what?" Thomas demanded. "Awareness, consciousness. The boundaries between individual and collective understanding become permeable." A soft sound from the bedroom interrupted their conversation. Thomas found Jack sitting up in bed, eyes open but unfocused. "Jack, you okay, buddy?" Jack turned slowly toward his father's voice. "They found the first entrance. The one by the stream." "The researchers?" Thomas asked, alarmed. Jack nodded. "But they can't open it. They need the stone key." His eyes cleared somewhat. "Dad, I'm having trouble staying just in one place." "What do you mean?" My thinking goes everywhere. Into the trees, underground, with the animals." Jack rubbed his eyes. "It's hard to remember I'm just me sometimes." Thomas sat on the edge of the bed, deeply concerned. "Maybe we should slow down with all of this." "Take a step back?" "Can't," Jack said simply. "It's already happening." The waking up. Emma appeared in the doorway. "Dad, the orchid is doing something weird." They returned to find the plant's petals fully extended and pulsing with light, its color shifting rapidly through spectrum. Small tendrils had extended toward the window, pointing insistently. "Someone approaches," Manuel translated. "Someone different from the researchers." Thomas moved cautiously to the window. In the clearing beyond their perception-shifted boundary stood a figure unlike the scientists they'd observed. A woman in practical jungle attire, her dark hair streaked with silver, studying the area with experienced eyes. Something about her stance suggested military training. "Government agent," Manuel whispered. "Special division that oversees research operations in protected territories. Can she see us?" Thomas asked. "Unknown. Jack's concealment works on perception, not physical reality. Someone highly trained might sense the discrepancy." The woman moved methodically through the clearing, occasionally consulting a handheld device. She paused precisely where the cabin's boundary would begin, her head tilting slightly, as if hearing something just at the edge of perception. "She feels it," Manuel confirmed. "The question is whether she believes what her senses tell her." Sophie approached the window, the orchid's tendrils extending toward her as if seeking protection. "She's been here before," she whispered. "A long time ago. How could you possibly know that?" Emma asked. Sophie pointed to the orchid. "It remembers her." Manuel's expression shifted to one of shock. "Impossible, unless..." He studied the woman more carefully. Yes, the resemblance is there. Resemblance to whom? Thomas asked. Your grandfather's research partner, Elena Cortez. She was with him when they first discovered the temple's existence. Manuel's voice dropped even lower. She was also the one who betrayed him to government interests. Outside, the woman reached into her pack and removed something that caught the sunlight, a small metal detector which she powered on. Immediately, Jack gasped from his position in the doorway. She's looking for the artifacts, he said. She can feel them calling. The digital tablet displayed a government insignia before loading a classified database labeled Project Verdant. Thomas stared at the device in shock. Elena Cortez had dropped it during her hasty retreat, when the jungle itself had seemingly risen to drive her away. Vines had whipped toward her with impossible precision, forcing her to abandon her equipment and flee. Now the tablet lay on their kitchen table, its secured files mysteriously unlocked and accessible. The living archive reached out to it, Jack explained matter-of-factly, though he appeared increasingly pale and thin. It wanted us to see. The screen displayed photographs of Thomas's grandfather alongside a younger Eleanor, cataloguing botanical specimens. Additional images showed laboratory facilities where plants with unusual properties were being studied. Most disturbing were documents outlining pharmaceutical and military applications of bioresponsive flora. They've been searching for decades, Manuel said, scrolling through files. After your grandfather disappeared with key specimens and research notes, the project continued in secret. Thomas studied a map highlighting anomalous botanical zones throughout the region. Their location was marked with a red flag labeled Priority Alpha. They know exactly where we are, he realized. The perception shifting only worked because they weren't sure what they were looking for. Emma leaned over his shoulder. Look at this. She pointed to a personnel file for Elena Cortez, which listed her current position: Director, Biological Resource Acquisition, Defense Department. She's not just a researcher, Thomas said grimly. She's here to secure whatever we've found for military development. Sophie, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke. The orchid is dying. They turned to find the sentinel plant wilting rapidly, its vibrant colors fading to ashen gray. Jack approached it, placing his small hand gently on its drooping petals. It's not dying, he corrected. It's transforming, releasing its energy to warn the others. What others? Thomas asked. As if in response, distant sounds of disturbance came from the jungle, crashing vegetation, raised voices, mechanical equipment. Thomas moved to the window, discovering a convoy of vehicles approaching along a hastily cleared path. They're coming in force, he announced. At least 20 personnel. We have to leave, Emma urged. Now, Manuel shook his head. Where would you go? This is happening because they've finally identified this location as the source point. Running now just makes you fugitives. We already are, Thomas countered. Not officially. Not yet, Manuel gestured toward the tablet. That contains evidence of unauthorized research, potential violations of protected land statutes. Information that could be leveraged. Jack, still communing with the fading orchid, spoke without turning. The temple is calling us. We need to go deeper. Jack, Thomas began. Dad, please. Jack finally turned, his eyes unusually bright. I know what I'm doing. The mask showed me. Sophie moved to her brother's side, taking his hand. I've seen it too, in my drawings. There's a sanctuary below where they can't follow. Thomas hesitated, torn between rational caution and the increasingly undeniable reality that his children were accessing knowledge beyond conventional understanding. Emma surprised everyone by supporting her siblings. The temple is our only advantage. They want what's down there, which means it's valuable enough to protect. The sounds of approaching vehicles grew louder. We can't take everything, Thomas decided. Just essentials and the artifacts. They moved with practiced efficiency, gathering the jade jaguar, the stone key, the ceremonial mask, and other discovered items into backpacks. The bronze amulet remained around Thomas's neck, warming against his skin as if approving their decision. What about the tablet? Emma asked. "Bring it," Thomas replied. As Manuel said, "Leverage." The wilting orchid suddenly shed its remaining petals, which dissolved into a fine, luminescent pollen. The golden particles hung suspended in the air momentarily before floating toward the door, not randomly, but in a deliberate stream. "It's showing us the way," Jack whispered, his energy seemingly renewed by the plant's transformation. Manuel gathered his few possessions. "We must reach the reflection chamber before they secure the perimeter. From there, we can access deeper levels." Outside, the approaching vehicles were now visible through the trees. Thomas recognized military-grade transport trucks and equipment carriers. This was no longer a research expedition, but an extraction operation. "They're not even trying to be subtle," he observed. "They believe they have legal authority," Manuel explained. "A claim that this land contains resources vital to national security would supersede your ownership rights." As they prepared to slip away, Jack paused at the cabin door, placing his hand against the weathered wood. "Thank you," he whispered to the structure that had sheltered them. Thomas watched with amazement as the cabin's appearance began to change, not physically, but in a way that altered perception. The wooden walls seemed to age decades in moments, roof sagging, vegetation accelerating its reclamation until the building appeared long abandoned. "Another trick the mask taught you?" Thomas asked his son. Jack nodded. "Memories can be shifted too. Now they'll think no one's been here for years." The family followed the stream of golden pollen as it wound through the jungle, away from the approaching convoy and toward the hidden temple entrance. Behind them, Elena Cortez's voice carried on a megaphone. "Attention occupants. This area is now under government jurisdiction. Surrender immediately for processing." "Processing," Emma whispered. "Interrogation," Manuel clarified. "They want to know everything you've learned. Then they'd better not catch us," Thomas replied, guiding his family deeper into the protective embrace of the jungle. The holographic projector was no larger than a walnut, an intricately carved sphere of what appeared to be solid crystal. When activated by Jack's touch, it cast a three-dimensional image of the entire temple complex, an elaborate network of chambers and passages extending far beneath the jungle floor. The projection hovered above the device, glowing with a soft blue light that illuminated the reflection chamber where the family had taken refuge. "It's a Verdante's navigation tool," Manuel explained, his voice hushed with wonder. "I've heard of these, but never seen one functioning." They had reached the underground temple moments before Eleanor's forces secured the outer perimeter. Thomas had sealed the entrance using the stone key, but they could hear faint mechanical sounds above, ground-penetrating radar and other detection equipment scanning for hidden structures. "How long before they find this place?" Thomas asked. Manuel studied the holographic map. "The temple is shielded in ways modern technology struggles to detect. But with enough time and resources, they have both," Emma noted grimly, reviewing data on the government tablet. "Project Verdant has operated with black budget funding for 30 years. Jack sat cross-legged on the chamber floor, the ceremonial mask resting in his lap, his attention fixed on the holographic display. "We need to go here," he said, pointing to a chamber deep within the complex, pulsing with brighter light than the surrounding areas. "The heart. That's at least a kilometer underground," Thomas observed. "Is there even air down there?" "The temple maintains itself," Manuel replied. "The Verdantes created self-sustaining ecosystems throughout the complex." Sophie had been sketching rapidly, her drawings matching sections of the projected map with uncanny accuracy. "There are others already down there," she announced suddenly. "What others?" Thomas asked, alarmed. "The jungle people. The ones who've been watching us." Sophie pointed to her drawing, where she had included small figures in a chamber near the heart. "They're waiting for us." A sudden commotion from the sealed entrance interrupted their discussion. Metal striking stone. Voices calling out instructions. "They're trying to break through," Emma whispered. Jack stood, lifting the mask to his face momentarily. When he lowered it, his expression was eerily calm. They can't enter without the key, but they'll keep trying. We need to go deeper now. Thomas studied his youngest son, increasingly concerned by the changes in him. Jack's connection to the Verdante artifacts had accelerated in recent days, granting him knowledge and abilities that seemed beyond his years. The boy appeared physically diminished, thinner, paler, yet somehow expanded in presence. "Jack," Thomas said gently, "you need to rest. You're pushing yourself too hard." "There's no time, Dad," Jack replied with quiet certainty. "What's coming has been waiting for generations. I'm just helping it arrive." "What's coming?" Thomas pressed. Before Jack could answer, a new sound emerged from the reflection pool, a resonant tone like crystal being struck. The dark surface rippled, and from its depths rose a small object that floated to the edge nearest Thomas. Grandfather's watch, he recognized, lifting the pocket watch Manuel had given him weeks earlier. The previously inert timepiece now ticked steadily, its hands moving in a pattern that didn't correspond to conventional time. "It's counting down," Manuel observed. "But to what?" Jack approached, touching the watch face lightly. "To revelation. Grandfather knew this day would come." The hammering at the entrance intensified. A fine dust began to sift from the stone ceiling. "They're using explosives," Manuel warned. "Carefully calibrated, but still dangerous." Emma secured the tablet in her backpack. "We need to move." Thomas hesitated, then made his decision. "Show us the way," he said to Jack. The boy nodded, then approached the chamber's far wall, where intricate carvings resembled abstract art rather than functional mechanisms. Jack placed his palm against a particular pattern, and a section of the wall receded silently, revealing a passage not shown on the holographic map. "How did you know that was there?" Thomas asked. "The mask showed me," Jack replied simply. "There are paths only guardians can see." As they prepared to enter the hidden passage, Sophie paused, tilting her head as if listening. "Wait," she said. "Someone's coming who isn't with the soldiers." Manuel stilled, focusing his experienced senses. "She's right." Moments later, the sound of running footsteps approached from a secondary corridor, lighter than military boots, moving with desperate speed. A figure burst into the reflection chamber. A young woman, in her late 20s, dressed in research attire, clearly fleeing from something. She skidded to a stop at the sight of them, eyes widening with shock. "You're real," she gasped. "The family living in the cabin. They said you were just a local legend." Thomas positioned himself protectively before his children. "Who are you?" "Dr. Meera Patel, Botanical Research Team." She glanced nervously over her shoulder. "Please, they've detained my colleagues. They're classifying everything as military assets." "This isn't what I signed up for. Why should we trust you?" Emma demanded, Dr. Patel's gaze fixed on the holographic projector still displaying the temple complex. "Because I've been searching for this place my entire career. Not to exploit it, but to protect it." She reached into her pocket slowly, removing a folded photograph. "I believe you knew my mentor." Thomas took the offered photograph, inhaling sharply at the image, his grandfather, much younger, standing beside a South Asian woman in research gear. "That's Dr. Amara Patel, my mother," the researcher explained. "Your grandfather's true research partner before." Elena Cortez pushed her out and took credit for their discoveries. The bioluminescent fungal network pulsed with light as they moved deeper into the temple complex, following a living pathway that responded to their presence. What initially appeared to be simple illumination revealed itself as a sophisticated communication system, patterns flowing through the fungal strands like data through fiber optic cables, carrying messages deeper into the earth. "Mycelial intelligence," Dr. Meera Patel explained, recording the phenomenon with scientific wonder. "My mother theorized its existence, but seeing it actually functioning." They had been traveling downward for hours, following Jack through increasingly ancient sections of the temple. The architectural style had evolved as they descended, newer constructions giving way to chambers of great antiquity, their purpose not immediately apparent to untrained eyes. The Verdantes understood that fungi form the internet of the forest, Manuel explained. They cultivated these networks as both infrastructure and record-keeping. Thomas watched the light patterns change as Jack passed, responding differently to the boy than to the others. They recognize him somehow. They recognize all of us, Jack corrected, his voice echoing strangely in the vaulted chamber they were traversing. But they're most interested in those who can hear them back. Above, faint but persistent, came the sounds of Elena's team attempting to breach the sealed entrance. Periodically, small tremors shook loose ancient dust from the ceiling. They're using increasingly powerful charges, Dr. Patel noted with concern. Elena won't be deterred by conventional barriers. She doesn't understand what she's disturbing, Manuel said grimly. The temple's defenses will activate if sufficiently threatened. What defenses? Emma asked, still maintaining healthy skepticism, despite all they'd witnessed. As if answering her question, the fungal network suddenly flashed with rapid pulses of crimson light. Throughout the chamber, previously unnoticed nodules began secreting a luminous substance that hardened almost instantly upon contact with air. Bioconcrete, Dr. Patel whispered, examining the material without touching it. Self-deploying structural reinforcement. Jack paused at a junction where 3 passages met, consulting the holographic projector. We need to go this way, he indicated the central path. But first, he turned to his sister Sophie. Show them what you've drawn. Sophie hesitantly opened her sketchbook. The most recent pages contained detailed renderings of what appeared to be defensive measures. Jungle plants reconfigured into barrier formations, root systems creating blockades, spore release mechanisms designed to create disorienting but non-lethal effects. How did you know to draw these? Thomas asked, amazed at the technical precision. I see them when I sleep, Sophie replied simply. The knowledge wants to be remembered. Dr. Patel studied the drawings with professional interest. These are genetically modified defense systems, plants engineered to respond to specific threats. Remarkable. Can we implement any of them to slow down Elena's team? Thomas asked. Some, yes. Dr. Patel pointed to several designs. These spore dispersal mechanisms exist naturally in certain fungi. With the right catalyst, I can show you, Sophie offered, suddenly confident. While Sophie worked with Dr. Patel and Manuel to deploy natural defenses, Thomas took a moment with Emma, who had been uncharacteristically quiet. You okay? He asked his eldest. Emma's expression was troubled. Dad, what happens if we reach this heart Jack keeps talking about? What then? We can't live underground forever. One problem at a time, Thomas replied, though the same question had been troubling him. First, we stay ahead of Elena. And after? If we survive this? Emma persisted. I had plans, Dad, college, a future. Thomas placed a hand on her shoulder. I know, and you'll still have that future, just maybe not exactly as we imagined. Jack approached them, his small face serious. The heart isn't just a place, he said, apparently having overheard. It's a choice. Grandfather understood that. What choice? Thomas asked. Before Jack could answer, a more substantial tremor shook the chamber, dislodging ancient stonework from the ceiling. Thomas pulled Emma to safety as a section of the ceiling collapsed behind them. They've breached the outer seal, Manuel announced, returning from his position as lookout. They're in the reflection chamber. Dr. Patel checked the tablet they'd taken from Elena. They're deploying exploration teams in 3-person units. Standard military formation. The spore traps are set, Sophie reported. And they'll activate when disturbed. Jack's expression became distant, as if listening to something beyond human hearing. We need to move now. The jungle people are gathering at the heart. They're waiting for us. Who are these jungle people exactly? Emma demanded. Why are they involved? Descendants of the original Verdante, Manuel explained. They've lived in isolation, protecting the temple's knowledge for generations. They're the true guardians, and they've been watching us all along, Sophie added. Since the day we arrived, Jack nodded solemnly. They needed to be sure of us, of our intentions. And are they? Thomas asked. Sure of us? They're sure of Jack, Manuel replied quietly. The rest of us remain to be tested, Another tremor, stronger than before, emphasized the urgency of their situation. Dust and small debris showered from above. "We need to reach the heart before Elena reaches us," Jack said, turning toward the central passage. The fungal network ahead brightened, illuminating their path forward like an airport runway. "It's ready for us now." As they prepared to continue their journey deeper, Thomas noticed that the bronze amulet around his neck had begun to pulse with light in perfect synchronization with the fungal network, as if the two were somehow communicating, preparing for what lay ahead. The crystalline codex hummed with an internal resonance when Thomas ran his fingers across its surface. Composed of what appeared to be diamond-like material arranged in tessellating hexagons, the translucent tablet contained no visible writing, yet somehow conveyed information directly to the mind of whoever touched it. Thomas had discovered it embedded in the wall of a small antechamber as they neared the deepest levels of the temple complex. "The voice of the ancestors," Manuel whispered reverently. "I never believed I would see one intact." The group had paused to rest in a chamber, roughly halfway to the heart, according to Jack's holographic map. Above them, the sounds of pursuit had grown more organized. Elena's teams methodically mapping the upper levels, undeterred by the defensive measures Sophie and Dr. Patel had deployed. "What does it say?" Thomas asked, his fingers still resting on the codex's cool surface. "Different things to different people," Manuel explained. "It responds to the questions in your mind." Thomas concentrated, focusing on their immediate situation. Instantly, the codex's surface clouded, then cleared to reveal what appeared to be strategic information. Paths through the temple that would bypass Elena's teams. Chambers with additional defensive capabilities. Hiding places if needed. "It's a tactical advisor," he realized. Dr. Patel approached cautiously. "May I?" When Thomas nodded, she placed her palm against the crystalline surface. Her eyes widened. "Incredible. It's showing me botanical formulations, plant-based technologies the Verdantes developed for environmental restoration." When Emma touched it, her expression shifted from skepticism to wonder. "It's explaining how Verdante's knowledge could be integrated with modern science without exploitation. Sustainable applications, ethical frameworks." She looked up at her father. "This isn't primitive mysticism. It's advanced science we've forgotten." Jack, who had been unusually quiet, finally approached the codex. The moment his small fingers contacted its surface, the entire tablet illuminated with brilliant internal light. Patterns rippled through its crystalline structure like neural networks activating. "Jack?" Thomas asked, concerned. The boy's eyes had closed, his expression one of deep concentration. "I see what Grandpa saw," he whispered. "Why he protected this place." "What did he see?" Thomas prompted gently. Jack's eyes opened, somehow older than before. "Everything is connected. The Verdantes didn't just understand plants or animals, they understood the web that links all living things. Their technology wasn't about dominating nature, but becoming more fully part of it." The codex pulsed again, responding to Jack's touch with increasing intensity. "The heart contains the seed bank," Jack continued, "clearly receiving information beyond what the others could access. Living specimens of plants that no longer exist anywhere else on Earth. Plants that can purify water, clean soil, remove carbon from the atmosphere, heal diseases modern medicine can't touch. That's why Elena and her team want it," Dr. Patel realized. "Exclusive patents on such organisms would be worth billions." Jack shook his head. "They don't understand. The heart isn't just a collection. It's alive, conscious. The plants, fungi, microorganisms, they form a collective intelligence that's been waiting, growing, learning. The Verdante didn't create it. They communicated with it, became partners with it." Thomas exchanged concerned glances with Manuel. "Jack, how do you know all this?" "The mask showed me first. Now the codex is filling in the details." Jack's voice had taken on an unsettling maturity. "Dad, the heart chose us. Before we ever came here. It's been watching our family for generations." A distant explosion interrupted them. followed by the sound of falling stone. "They're getting closer," Emma warned. Manuel checked the passage they had come from. "Elena must have found the main route. They'll be using the most direct path to the deepest signal sources." Dr. Patel consulted the tablet they'd taken. "According to their communication logs, they've divided into 3 teams: mapping, acquisition, and security." "We need to keep moving," Thomas decided. Jack reluctantly pulled his hand away from the codex, which dimmed as contact was broken. "There's one more chamber before the heart, a place of preparation." "Preparation for what?" Thomas asked. "For meeting them," Jack replied cryptically. They continued their descent, following passages that narrowed and twisted in ways that defied conventional architecture. The stone walls had given way to something that appeared partially organic, a hybrid of mineral and living tissue that pulsed subtly with interior light. "The temple is more alive the deeper we go," Dr. Patel observed, recording observations on a small notepad she carried. "The distinction between construction and organism becomes increasingly blurred." Eventually, they reached a circular chamber with 7 archways leading outward like spokes from a wheel. At the center stood a raised dais, empty except for a shallow depression. The gateway chamber, Manuel identified it from ancient texts he had studied. The final threshold before the heart. Jack approached the dais confidently. "We need all the artifacts." Understanding, Thomas removed the bronze amulet from around his neck. Sophie produced the stone tablet fragment. Emma reluctantly added the government tablet containing Project Verdant's data. Manuel placed the jade key beside these. Dr. Patel contributed a pendant she had kept hidden, a metal disc matching the one Thomas's grandfather had given Manuel. "My mother's," she explained. "Her guardian token." Jack added the jade jaguar figurine and finally the ceremonial mask. The collected items arranged themselves in the depression as if guided by unseen forces, forming a pattern that matched symbols carved into the chamber floor. "Now we wait," Jack said. "For what?" Emma asked. The answer came as a soft glow began to emanate from the artifacts, bathing the chamber in gentle, prismatic light. From one of the 7 archways emerged figures, humans dressed in simple clothing, adorned with botanical elements, their skin painted with patterns matching those in the temple. "The jungle people," Sophie whispered. "The last guardians," Manuel corrected respectfully. Their leader, a woman of indeterminate age with eyes that reflected wisdom beyond years, stepped forward. She studied each member of their group in turn before her gaze settled on Jack. "The time has come," she said in accented but clear English. "The heart awakens." The suspended ecosystem sphere dominated the heart chamber, floating without visible support at the center of a vast underground cathedral. Within its 20-foot diameter, entire miniature biomes thrived: rainforest, savanna, tundra, desert, ocean, each flowing into the next in perfect harmony. Clouds formed and dispersed in its internal atmosphere. Tiny lightning storms flickered between microscopic mountain ranges, and water cycled through diminutive rivers and seas. It was Earth in miniature, a living model of the planet's interconnected systems. "The Verdante's paradigm," whispered the Guardian leader, who had introduced herself as Nasira. "The complete understanding of life's web preserved in living form." The heart chamber extended hundreds of feet in every direction, its vaulted ceiling lost in darkness above. Surrounding the floating sphere were terraced gardens, where plants unknown to modern botany grew in carefully maintained beds. Guardian attendants moved among these specimens, tending them with reverent care. The air here was different, richer somehow, carrying scents that triggered emotions along with sensory responses. Jack approached the sphere without hesitation, his small face illuminated by its internal light. "It's been waiting," he said simply. Thomas watched his son with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Jack had grown increasingly attuned to the temple's mysteries during their journey, accessing knowledge that should have been beyond his understanding. Now standing before the paradigm sphere, the boy seemed almost transfigured, diminished physically but expanded in some intangible way. "What happens now?" Thomas asked Nasira. "The awakening," she replied. "For generations the heart has been dormant, preserving rather than creating. Now it stirs. From the tunnels behind them came sounds of approaching intrusion. Elena's teams had navigated the temple's defenses and were closing in on the heart. Dr. Patel checked the captured tablet's readings, multiple heat signatures converging. They're using the artifact's energy emissions to track us. Can we seal the chamber?" Emma asked urgently. Nasira shook her head. "The heart must remain accessible. That is its purpose, to be found by those who seek understanding, even those who would exploit it." Thomas challenged. "The heart judges intentions," Manuel explained. "It always has." Jack turned from his contemplation of the sphere. "They're coming now. Elena is with them." As if summoned by his words, the main entrance to the chamber filled with figures, soldiers in tactical gear followed by research personnel carrying specialized equipment. Elena Cortez strode at their center, her expression shifting from triumph to astonishment as she beheld the paradigm sphere. "Secure the chamber," she ordered sharply. "No one touches anything until the containment team arrives." The soldiers fanned out, weapons raised. The Guardians made no move to resist, standing calmly beside their garden terraces. "Dr. Elena Cortez," Manuel stepped forward. "Still serving yourself while pretending to serve knowledge." Elena's gaze hardened as she recognized him. "Manuel Ortega, I should have known you'd be involved." Her attention shifted to Thomas, and Albert's grandson. "How fitting." "This place isn't yours to take," Thomas stated firmly, positioning himself between Elena and his children. "This place belongs to humanity's future," Elena countered. "Too important to be left in the hands of mystics and recluses." She gestured toward the sphere. "Do you have any idea what that represents?" "Technologies that could transform medicine, agriculture, environmental restoration, and warfare," Dr. Patel interjected, stepping forward. "Isn't that why Defense Department black budgets have funded Project Verdant for decades?" Elena's eyes narrowed as she recognized the younger woman. "Dr. Mira Patel, following in your mother's misguided footsteps, I see. My mother understood what you never did, that knowledge without wisdom becomes destruction." Elena signaled to her team. "Secure the primary specimen. Prepare it for transport." As the researchers approached the paradigm sphere with specialized containment equipment, Jack moved to stand directly beneath it. The boy raised his hands, and to everyone's astonishment, the massive sphere descended until it hovered just above his reach. "Step away from the specimen." "Son," Elena ordered. Jack turned to face her, his expression unnervingly calm. "It's not a specimen. It's alive, conscious." Elena's patience visibly thinned. "Remove the child," she commanded a nearby soldier. As the man moved toward Jack, the chamber's ambient lighting shifted dramatically. The bioluminescent fungi covering the walls pulsed with warning patterns. Throughout the terraced gardens, plants suddenly oriented toward the intruders, some unfurling structures that had been dormant for centuries. "I wouldn't do that," Manuel cautioned. "The heart defends itself." The soldier hesitated, looking to Elena for direction. She responded with a curt nod, and he resumed his approach toward Jack. The moment he came within arm's reach of the boy, the paradigm sphere emitted a blinding flash. When vision cleared, the soldier stood frozen in place, his expression one of absolute wonder rather than aggression. "What did you do?" Elena demanded. "Not me," Jack replied softly. "It showed him." "Showed him what?" "Everything." Jack gestured to the sphere above him, which had begun rotating more rapidly, its internal systems accelerating. "What we're connected to, what we're destroying, what we could become instead." Throughout the chamber, the Guardian plants had fully activated, releasing microscopic spores that drifted on air currents toward the intruders. Wherever these particles contacted skin or were inhaled, the affected individuals underwent a visible transformation, not physical but perceptual. One by one, Elena's team lowered their weapons, their faces registering the same profound shift as the first soldier. "Stop!" Elena commanded. but her authority was crumbling as her personnel succumbed to whatever revelation the spores conveyed. "It's not control," Jack explained, his voice somehow carrying throughout the vast space. "It's connection. The heart doesn't force, it reveals." The regeneration matrix resembled living amber, a transparent, honey-colored substance that flowed like liquid yet maintained structural integrity. Contained within specialized vessels throughout the heart chamber, it pulsed with internal light that synchronized with the paradigm sphere's rotations. As the confrontation reached its climax, these vessels began to open autonomously, the matrix within them responding to some unseen command. Elena Cortez stood isolated amid her converted team, rage and disbelief warring on her face. "What have you done to my people?" "Shown them truth," Nasira replied calmly. "The heart has that effect." The matrix had begun to flow from its containers, forming rivulets that moved with apparent intelligence across the chamber floor. Where it touched the ancient stone, dormant patterns activated, spiraling designs that had awaited this moment for centuries. "This facility is property of the United States government," Elena insisted, though her authority had clearly evaporated. She drew a sidearm from beneath her jacket. "I am leaving with specimens and data." Thomas moved protectively toward his children, but Jack stepped forward with surprising confidence. "You still don't understand," the boy said, his voice carrying an authority beyond his years. "Nothing here belongs to anyone. It belongs with everyone." The matrix rivulets had reached Jack's feet, swirling around him without making contact. The boy knelt, placing his palm against the amber-like substance. It responded immediately, climbing his arm without wetting it, forming complex patterns that matched those now illuminated throughout the chamber. "What is happening?" Thomas asked Manuel urgently. "The final awakening," the old man replied with reverent awe. "The heart is not just preserving knowledge now, it's preparing to share it." Dr. Patel had been monitoring the captured government tablet, which was displaying increasingly erratic readings. "Something's affecting all electronic systems. The matrix appears to be generating some form of quantum field." Emma, who had maintained her skepticism longer than anyone, now watched open-mouthed as the matrix formed a perfect replica of the bronze amulet on the floor before her. "It's communicating through symbols we recognize," she realized. Elena, seeing her mission collapsing, raised her weapon toward the paradigm sphere. "If I can't secure it, I'll ensure no one else does." "No." Thomas lunged toward her. Before either could act, the matrix surged upward in a golden wave, engulfing Elena's weapon and transforming it, not destroying it, but converting its material into harmless organic matter that crumbled like autumn leaves. Stunned, Elena backed away, only to find herself surrounded by a circle of matrix that rose to form a transparent barrier. She was contained but unharmed, able to witness but not interfere. The paradigm sphere began to descend fully, coming to rest upon the central dais. As it touched down, its surface became permeable, releasing microscopic particles that filled the air like golden dust. Jack stood before it, the matrix patterns on his skin now glowing intensely. "It's time," he said, looking to his family with eyes simultaneously childlike and ancient. "The heart has chosen all of us as its new caretakers." Thomas approached his son, deeply concerned about whatever transformation was occurring. "Jack, what's happening to you?" "I'm still me, Dad," Jack reassured him with a smile that was entirely his own. "Just connected now." The knowledge was too much for one mind, so the heart helped me share it. The golden particles settled on everyone present, Thomas's family, Manuel, Dr. Patel, the Guardians, even Elena's converted team. Where they touched skin, they conveyed information directly, bypassing normal sensory channels. Thomas gasped as understanding flooded him. Not just intellectual comprehension, but deep, intuitive knowing. The Verdante's wisdom, their harmonious technologies, their methods of working with, rather than against, natural systems, all became accessible, not as separate facts but as an integrated whole. "This is incredible," Dr. Patel whispered, tears streaming down her face. My mother was right about everything. Sophie was drawing rapidly, capturing concepts too complex for words. Emma stood wide-eyed as scientific understandings beyond current paradigms reorganized her view of reality. Throughout the chamber, similar revelations were occurring as the heart shared its accumulated wisdom. The knowledge cannot belong to any one group, Nasira explained, addressing everyone present. The heart has waited for the right moment, when humanity faces ecological crisis, yet still has time to change course. Why us? Thomas asked, still struggling to comprehend their family's role. Your grandfather recognized the heart's importance when others saw only resources to exploit, Manuel answered. He protected it, knowing someday his bloodline might return when the world was ready. Jack approached Elena's containment circle, the matrix parting to allow him through. You can be part of this too, he offered compassionately. The heart excludes no one who's willing to understand. 6 months later, the temple complex had been transformed into something new. A research center, unlike any on Earth. The jungle above had been declared a protected biosphere, jointly managed by an international consortium of scientists, indigenous guardians, and environmental organizations. The heart's technologies were being carefully documented and shared, with applications focusing first on environmental restoration and sustainable agriculture. Thomas stood at the entrance to what had once been their cabin, now expanded into a modest research facility. Emma was preparing for university, having received a special scholarship to study Verdante's biotechnology. Sophie's artistic talents had found purpose in communicating complex ecological concepts through visual media. And Jack, though still very much a child in most ways, had become a bridge between the heart's consciousness and human understanding. Do you ever regret it? Dr. Patel asked, joining Thomas on the porch. Coming here with no plan, no resources? Thomas watched his children working alongside guardian apprentices in the thriving garden, which now produced enough food to support not only their community, but neighboring villages as well. I thought we had lost everything, he replied thoughtfully. Turns out we were just finding our way home. In the jungle canopy above, new growth had emerged, plants with subtly altered characteristics that filtered more carbon, produced more oxygen, and strengthened the entire ecosystem. The first visible evidence of the heart's technologies spreading healing through a wounded world. Maria would be proud, Manuel observed. Having overheard their conversation, Thomas nodded, touching the bronze amulet that still hung around his neck. She knew somehow. Jack says she guided us here. The heart works in mysterious ways, Manuel smiled. Perhaps she found it before we did. As twilight descended, the jungle glowed with soft bioluminescence, a living reminder of the connection between all things, and the unexpected journey that had transformed a desperate escape into humanity's new beginning.